Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. This is our roundtable discussion, the state of technology adoption in the broadcast industry. We're going to get into a panel discussion momentarily. Just before we get started, there's a few words I'd like to say as an introduction. To begin with, in terms of some logistics for everybody to keep in mind, there will be some information coming in chat for you guys to consider if you need more info. So watch out in the chat. There will be links placed in there that you can use to get more information or contact us. And of course, please, if you have questions at any time, submit them using the Q&A tool. We will be making sure you get answers to your questions. So let's keep going here. The whole point of this webinar today is to discuss the findings of our 6th annual Haivision Broadcast Transformation Report. It came out a few weeks ago. This report covers all sorts of trends that have been going on in the industry, some forward-looking vision of what's going on, where we see things going in the future, what's been going on in the past, and of course, what people are seeing in terms of priorities and top challenges, solutions, etc. today. If you haven't downloaded it yet, we encourage you to do so. There is a link in the chat that you can use to download it, or you can go ahead and scan that QR code and you'll get access to the PDF version of the broadcast report right away. So please make sure you do. And I would like to make sure everybody understands that this report this year, this is actually the largest number of respondents we've ever had to date, almost 900, which is a massive number of people contributing perspective on what's going on in the broadcast industry. So there's a lot of very interesting insights that come from a big sample of different types of people from the broadcast industry, from broadcasters to engineers, vendors, partners, resellers, VARs, all consultants, systems integrators, many different perspectives. So it's very interesting, lots of interesting data. And if you didn't respond to the survey this year, note that when it is available, because of course we will be doing it next year, the people that respond are entered into a drawing to win an iPhone. Well, this year it was to win an iPhone. And we would like to thank one person in particular, Guillaume Ricavier, who won. And thank you very much for sharing the fact that you did on X. This is, it says here, by the way, translation, I got an email from Caroline. Thank you, Haivision. So that was from the winner of the survey, those who completed the survey, won the iPhone 16. So download it, and next year, please join and answer the survey. In case you've joined and are not sure who Haivision is, just a quick note. So we are a company that provides solutions to the broadcast industry. Essentially, we provide an end-to-end product ecosystem for broadcast contribution from source to production. So whatever happens at the venue, goes into your camera. We provide solutions that allow you to get that encoded and sent off to where you need it so you can do your live production, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud. The notable products in our portfolio include the ultra-low latency Makito X4 video encoder for wired contribution workflows, the Haivision Pro series low latency mobile transmitters for wireless over cellular, and of course, the receivers for these workflows, Haivision Stream Hub, which allows you to take in those feeds and then distribute them into your workflow. The whole thing is managed by our cloud master control solution called Haivision Hub 360. So if you need any more information about this stuff, please get in touch. And again, the chat has the link to sales@haivision.com. So with that, let's jump in and start talking about the report. And before we get to the panelists, I just wanted to mention the coverage. There has been quite a bit of press coverage already about what the findings are in this report. The coverage varies. It goes across from different topics, but clearly the fact that AI has had a bump in usage since last year was of a lot of interest across the board. Variety magazine, for instance, a quarter of all broadcasters now using AI. We see the AI topic came up in a number of other articles, for instance, that from TVB Europe, and otherwise cloud, SRT. These topics were cited in the various press coverage. So we're very thankful for all the coverage. Let's jump in and talk about what the key findings were. Of course, the report has much more information than just these 5 topics, but these were the ones that emerged as being the most important that we wanted to share with everybody based on this year. So, number 1, demand for efficiency is fueling 5G. Number 2, broadcasters are accelerating AI adoption. Number 3, SRT adoption soars, and it really grew significantly over last year. Number 4, hybrid on-premise and cloud usage goes mainstream. And number 5, HEVC catches up with H.264. And let's just look at those with a little bit of data backing up why these are the key findings. In terms of 5G usage, 76% of broadcasters who use cellular networks for contribution now rely on 5G. So that is up from last year. 25% of broadcasters are already using AI. That was up significantly, almost 3 times from last year. So that's quite a lot of growth in the AI side of things. SRT, 77% of broadcasters use SRT, making it the most widely used transport protocol. This has grown significantly, 9% from last year. It was already at the top of the list. And the distance between the next protocol, RTMP, has grown significantly. Cloud, what we see is 49% of respondents are relying on it for 25% of their workflow, but 86% of using it. So cloud is absolutely mainstream, but that hybrid approach looks like it's settling in at a quarter or so of the workflows. And finally, HEVC. It's been growing in every year of our survey. It's up. This year, 70% of people are using HEVC. And it's catching up. It's almost the same value as H.264. So I expect we'll see it hit H.264 in the next couple of years. So there you go. Those are the key findings. And with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists to join in on the conversation. And we're going to start going through some of these in more detail. So why don't we just start with a quick round of introductions? We've got Kurt Heitman from CP Communications, Brad Cheney from Fox Sports, and Morten Brandstrup from TV2 Denmark. Kurt, would you like to start introducing yourself?
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me, Marcus. It's an honor to be here. I'm the CEO of CP Communications. We provide innovative solutions for the broadcast and live streaming production industry. We've been in business since 1985.
Thanks. So, Brad?
Sure. Brad Cheney, Vice President of Field Operations and Engineering. I manage our field crews and transmission services between not only our networks, but also in the redistribution of our signal across the globe for our partners to pick up and retransmit and exist, and a large proponent and partner of IP video.
Thank you and welcome. And Morten?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you for having me here. I'm head of news technology, running the news operation for the biggest news outlet in Denmark. We are a commercial broadcaster, nationwide, and have a bunch of IP bundled cellular doing both for sports and for news production. Do a lot of remote production also, that's expanding and so on. So I'm happy to be here.
Very nice to have all of you. Thank you guys for joining. So let's jump right into it. And I'd like to start with the topic of 5G and cellular broadcasting. So the survey takeaway was 76% of broadcasters, sorry, I'm using my notes here, using cellular networks now rely on 5G, with 21% planning adoption within a year. The top benefits include greater bandwidth, 55% cited that, lower latency, 50%, and cost savings, 31%. So I'd like to start by asking you, Morten, do these findings surprise you in any way? Is this in line with your thinking?
Yeah, it's really in line with what we see. As in European perspective, we're getting the 5G network available, and we even in Denmark have several of the windows now running standalone 5G, which really have improved what we are able to do. I think we are still lagging quite a lot of actually having commercial available special service for the type of production we are doing. We are doing a lot of experiment with we have 5 MNOs in Denmark, and we are doing cool stuff with them. But we are still missing the real services getting there commercial.
That's, I mean, nevertheless, 76% of people are saying that they're using it. So somehow they're doing it.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Well, that's basically just because it's, I mean, 5G right now is just more 4G. So that's, I think, if you have the modem, you will get the service, and what you're getting is LTE, more 4G, and that's probably why most of us are saying that we are stepping into 5G. Then we can start discussing what is 5G and where is all the special services for that. But it's definitely getting the more bandwidth. For sure, we are seeing that, and but we also see that we are now able to experiment with having lower latency. Sorry, lower class-to-class latency in the operation. Yeah.
So, Brad, would you say that is aligning with your experience? How do you see 5G at Fox Sports?
Yeah, no, we've been in the marketplace in 5G for kind of since the beginning, quite honestly, and we see that 75% marker that you guys are seeing in the same aspect, in that we still have units that are doing cellular production that are still, majority of the SIMs in those units still are 4G, but quite honestly, we're seeing the benefit of having a quarter of them, half of them as 5G SIMs. And we're seeing a lot of benefit from having those 5G SIMs. We're able to do more with units, and you start looking at the units that are out there that do 4 paths at a time, on a single unit and things like that. You don't do that without 5G. You don't have that capability without that bandwidth that exists from that side, and that's really what drives forward this innovation that we're talking about. Is we're gaining capability and capacity. It's not always perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it is there, and the utilization of those modems continues to go up year over year for us from what we're seeing on our data rates when we're bringing in these units and doing that kind of work. Is that when you have 5G combined with the 4G LTE networks that are out there across the unit, you're getting a lot better throughput, you're getting more reliability, and as Morten said, you're gaining a lot of additional extra, or reducing your latency again, which is another piece of that puzzle, because it is transmitting across the network at a much lower latency rate.
So Court, what about your perspective from a CP standpoint?
Well, from the CP standpoint, we do an enormous amount of bonded cellular productions. Our bonded cellular productions range from golf to cross country to rowing events. And we see the 5G UW a lot. Okay, as Morten said, that is an enhanced 4G. It's not really 5G. However, at the Super Bowl this past year, we did see true 5G. So Verizon put a macro system in that was stadium wide, and the speeds are there. The radios are capable of them. We know they're there. We measured speeds of 3,000 down and 400 up. And that is just not something you're going to find in major cities. You'll find it in very specific applications, mostly football stadiums, right? Because Verizon is in every one of them. But T-Mobile's not far behind them. We see that T-Mobile out on a golf course in the Carolinas or wherever, we are averaging 16 megabits of throughput on a bonded cellular, right? Using a combination of 4G, 5G SIMs. So we are definitely using it, and as your report says, depending on what we are trying to accomplish, we may or may not add to it, and that would be a private network that we bring in. And that private network is operating on CBRS, right? And gives us, so that, what we find now is that in order to do a New York City Marathon on a large scale, there are certain areas where we have to bring a private network in to enhance the networks that are out there from Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile.
Well, certainly from a Haivision perspective, we've been involved in a number of projects where private 5G networks have been critical to success. Have you guys been leveraging that in specific use cases? Is there a time that you find, for instance, Brad, where 5G private network is critical for you?
Well, we think it's critical in two ways, Marcus, as we go forward in this world, is that, as Morten brought up and Court has as well, is that there are holes inside the public networks that exist. And as much as any of these, MNOs want to actually, enhance their coverage and do those things, capital, legal agreements, rules and regulations from the government, all put timelines of things that may not match our utilization basis that's there. And so these private networks are important. These private networks are also extremely important as you start layering on additional use cases like moving video. You start to talk about, especially in sports, where in any of these encoder packs that you're at, you're talking about, because it's moving video, it's moving people, it's fast, it's action packed, that you're talking about bit rates that are above 10 megabits a second. It's not the same thing that I'm going to use half the time when I'm doing a news live shot or I'm doing something else. I can be at a much lower bit rate because it's not taxing the encoding system. And so when you do that, now you look at it and go, well, if I've got 5 or 8 cameras like Court's talking about at a basketball event or at a football stadium, you start looking at that data rate, and that's pushing what any of the mobile operators can do, while also providing for all of our friends and family to be uploading to Instagram and Snapchat and all those other things that are out there. So it really is important to start having those networks that are there, because what we've learned is that the control and automation of that network is really important to us functioning going forward, and that technology is really the key to us being able to succeed in this new world and be able to share bandwidth and use it in the most effective way possible. And so having those private networks there has been really key to what we've done. We've done a lot of work with Haivision over the last couple of years, improving out these private networks and making them work and understanding that latency. And that conversation is really important as we go forward, because the learning has to be two ways. It has to be with you as a manufacturer and the Haivision equipment that we're using to do these projects. It has to be with the people managing these private mobile networks and how they work and how their antennas and radios work and how that all ties together on an IP networking core, because really we're showing people for the first time ever demands of movement of data at levels that they've never experienced, because they're, these MNOs built their networks for 1,000 phones to be doing a couple kilobits a second. Well, the total sustained data rate's exactly what we're talking about with moving video.
Right.
But the challenge is that now we're saying, no, there's 4 of those moving videos, and that's 4,000 phones, and that's 4 times the. So it's really that process of continuing to develop that radio workflow out there and that understanding so that we can deploy these things properly and correctly. And the challenge is we're working in an environment where it doesn't matter if you're in Denmark, in Europe, in Asia, in the Africa's, South America, or here in North America, that the amount of bandwidth we're getting to do things is continually shrinking, and that's a giant problem. So we need to kind of come up with new solutions, and this is really one of the new solutions.
So yeah, from a standpoint, yeah, Morten, but why don't you tell us a bit about your experience here?
Yeah, it's just because we have had the experience with having, as I'm running our own private network, we have a couple of these units and do that kind of production where we do multi-camera production, bringing in our own network, and by that have a secure, reliable connection for exactly as you're describing it, Brad. The higher bandwidth, we are talking 25, 30 megabit per camera instead of 5, 6 megabit. So that's all good. But I also think that private network, I won't argue that we should be the one running the private network. It's the lack of actually getting the real service. I would prefer not to deal with telco network. I would prefer that to be a service that someone is supplying me instead of me being the guy who has to deploy my own private network. And we have started now. We have a studio inside of Tivoli incoming where we have a 5G network and 100 megahertz slice and N77 and all that cool stuff. But we also convinced one of the operator to actually try to offer the private network as a service. So instead of us running the stuff, it's their core and their radio, just utilizing the private network, not the private network, but the spectrum. So I think the point with private network is that it's a secure spectrum that we are using for this, and not necessarily who is running the service. It's more, now I get a secure connection in spectrum.
Right. Yeah, Morten's correct. And it is all about the spectrum, right? You have networks here, CBRS, I mentioned that earlier, right, Marcus? And CBRS is a you must ask you must be granted access to use CBRS, okay? And when we are granted access, that's great. Now, how do we get that network to where we want it to be, right? And so we are working with a group called Pente Networks, who is working with some manufacturers of modems and radios, so that we can create that. But to Morten's point, you know, that's what CP does, right? So we're not a TV group. We're a provider of solutions. So for us, that's exactly what we want to do, Morten, is we want to be that company that comes in, says, here's 4 suitcases, give me a 1 gig pipe, public internet. Here's 4 suitcases, put up your 4 nodes. Here's your area. All the engineering is done already. We want to manage the back end, right? And we manage the back end so that you can handle your front end. And that's what CP has been striving for close to 5 years now. We've been playing in this space for a long time. We started it a long time ago with Brad in 2018 doing golf. All right. And we just continue to do it. It's taken 5 years for us to get to the point of being able to go to a Pente group and say, hey, I need 4 radios. I need them to be handoff from this point to this point to this point. And when you talk about a handoff, that's the critical part, right? Because a handoff for communications, if I'm on a Green system or I'm on a cell phone and you get a packet loss, not a big deal. Nobody's freaking out about that, okay? But if you have mission critical video acquisition going on and you go from one radio to the next and you've got a 1 second dropout and it's struggling to get, it's like being on Wi-Fi where it's holding on for as long as it can with one node and then it goes to the next node. That's not acceptable to TV2, that's not acceptable to Fox Sports, and that's not acceptable to CP. And that's where we are currently today. We cannot go from a macro system to a micro, from a micro to a macro system. It just doesn't happen right now. Seamlessly.
So let me ask that so you guys obviously have extensive experience using this right now, but for those, I mean, 76% said they're using it. There are still a quarter that aren't yet. Do you guys have any advice or any things that people should be considering if they haven't jumped on the 5G bandwagon yet? You know, Morten, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm also part of the EBU group in Europe, where we do a lot of work around the spectrum and access to that, and work with the European regulator. And this year, the Rapid Europe is rolled out the access to the N777 band, which is about the commercial band, so to speak. And it means that in Europe, there will be a standard way to get this regulation. So you actually get access to a certain amount of that spectrum, which is really cool because it works flawless with the unit and devices we already have. So it's an easy way to have spectrum. But my point is that everybody there who would like to play with this and see this useful could be useful in an operation should definitely go and talk to their regulator. It's so important that we are in dialogue with the regulator and actually get a standard way of getting access to this around not only in Europe but basically global, like our wireless radio system and so on. We need a standard to actually get this service, so we, wherever we go in the world, we can deploy that service. I mean, when we go to US and cover the sports and do World Cup football this summer, we would like to have the service from as a provider there. So that should be the message.
Brad?
Look, I think that what we're proving and talking about here is that, while there are people like ourselves on this call who've been doing this for a number of years, that it's ready. And, as you're buying your next generation of equipment, as you're doing those things, you need to be asking the question, making sure that you're prepared for the next generation. And that next generation is 5G currently, around the globe. And so really that's the aspect of it, is that it's there, it works, it can help your workflows, it can make your workflows better. And, from that side, it's future-proofing yourself.
But could I add to this, right? Because I think when we're talking about this, it's really important to understand because we're using a bonded cellular device that everybody knows is original made for news gathering, and that's cool. But the same device with the right service, with the right 5G service behind it, is able to run as a studio quality, as a low latency, and we're talking as low as less than 100 milliseconds. The same device that you use for the news group can actually be used in studio application, in real OB application, where things have to be much more low latency. And I think that's a cool thing. That's about being, utilizing the same tools for a lot of different applications, more as a better way of using the resources.
I think that's a very interesting point, where what we're seeing is the fact that this single way of deploying your cameras can actually be the same across all of these different, whether it's news, sports, studio, whatever the case may be. That's a pretty radical shift. Can we pivot to topic number 2? Because there's some interesting, lots more, of course, on the topic of 5G that we can be talking about, and hopefully we'll talk about it more next year when more people are using it. But I'd like to shift to cloud versus on-premise and just talk about the key takeaway there, which was that 86% of respondents indicated that they were using cloud to some extent, which is a lot. I mean, that's almost everybody. But half of them indicated that they were using it for less than a quarter of their workflow. It's a little up, but we're essentially saying that people are existing in a hybrid workflow now where they use cloud, they do a lot on-prem. And curious if you guys have any thoughts about where we're going with that. Is that normal for you? Is it different for you guys? Maybe we could start with Cord.
Sure. Our use of the cloud is well, your Stream Hub and your Hub 360, right? That's the majority of what we use it for, managing signals. We don't necessarily use it for distributing signals. We can spin up instances in AWS where we can take SRT, spin up an instance, and if we need to distribute that, say, to Los Angeles, to a hardware device, or to New York, then we use that and we'll spin up several instances and get to the edge, right? So it's faster. We keep our RTT times down. But the majority of cloud usage for us is not as a production tool, it's as a management tool. All right. And so we use it to manage everything from a bonded cellular to a Makito X to a return video solution, right? We use it for communications. We use it for, data, return data to an event. And that's all basically going to the cloud and then managing it down to the on-prem. As far as an on-prem versus cloud, everything we do is on-prem and cloud together. We do hybrids every single day. There's an old saying, you have to start in analog and end in analog, right? That's your eyes and your ears, right? So you have to acquire a signal, and that requires hardware. You have to then distribute that signal. Okay, you could be in the cloud. And then you have to go ahead and get to the end point where someone has to watch that signal. And that is, again, hardware. So for us, I don't think that cloud is ever going to be 100% use case. You will always have a hybrid.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think about that, Brad? Does it sound similar?
It's similar, and we're obviously probably further ahead, being a large broadcaster than most are from that aspect, and doing the things that the cloud is really good at. We're leveraging to the maximum effect at this point. And I think that the point that we like to look at is that it's about moving to a virtualized environment and being able to do multiple things on processing that exists that can be replicated and done and managed, and starts to bring your cost of ownership down on things, and the amount of equipment you need, and the amount of power you need, and the amount of cooling you need to do those things, because you can start to virtualize and put things together in function sets. But also too, you can then scale them as necessary. And the challenge we have in sports is no different than the challenge Morton and the team have in news, is that when things happen, you have to ramp up very quickly. And so that's what the cloud starts to give you, is you have a virtualized environment and you start to spin it up higher and higher as you need it. You look at, for us in sports, the fall is very big, a lot of actual American football going on, and those situations. But also too, we have large events like the World Cup that we do. The World Cup is twice the size of our normal event structure that exists. To then just automatically buy all that equipment and do all those things is not necessarily a function set we've got. we'll scale that up as we go forward. As you know, what we did in the past is not what we're going to do in the future. And so really for us, it's about virtualization and scalability that's there. And that's what the cloud gives us in those function sets that are there. So, you know, we're definitely trending above that number for what we're doing from a workflow standpoint, but it continues to grow year over year.
And what's happening, Morten, at a TV2 Denmark standpoint? Is it any different?
No, not really. It's the same. You know, in live production, it really limits as how much cloud is involved, and even software assisted production. I think that's the migration we're looking for, and it is the virtualization you're talking about, Brad. That's definitely how we run our data center and the production on that. But real cloud is not necessary. It's more right now. It's more for the distribution part of the production or stuff like the 5 workflows and so on, but less related to the live production so far.
But it ties into the topic of operational efficiency, I think. I mean, that was sort of what you were talking about, Brad. When we asked people what they thought were their biggest challenges, the top, unsurprisingly, 45% cited budgetary considerations. So do you guys see, well, Brad, you mentioned it already, but do you guys see that the cloud could be a way of helping? And what areas actually would you see being most likely to go cloud that aren't already? Morten, you want to just continue on that thought?
Yeah, because I think that's that's probably where it's not always about scaling up these days. Sometimes it's also about scaling down, meaning that we will have, if we have Sportsfire, when we have Sportsfire for different things or even for news and so on, you will have more output. We will have more pop-up channels, online stuff and so on. So with more or less the same stuff, you just have to do multiple output at the same time, meaning in traditional way, it means that you will have more galleries that you should have in operation. But nowadays, that would be much more about having the right software platform where you can spin up things, use it for that event, spin it down, and that's it. I think that is at least what we see in the market right now. That's where we will, as a benefit, quite a lot from the software-defined / cloud production stuff.
So, Court, where do you see? I mean, you've made it pretty clear that you see on-prem as being critical, but do you see areas in the cloud where you'd like to be doing more?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we'd love to, well, we do it now, right? The cloud allows me to have network operations centers all over the place. So we have a network operations center in Canada, in Nova Scotia. We have one in New York. We have one in Florida. We have 2 of them in Florida, and we're building another one in New York. So, and then we have network operations center at engineers' homes, okay? And that's where it becomes efficient. If they can just log into a centralized system in the cloud and they can manage workflow from acquisition to delivery, and I don't have to bring them into the shop, and they can do it from home, that's the advantage. That's the advantage in editing. That's the advantage in instant replay. That's the advantage in many of the things that Brad is doing, right? It's being able to work from home is a cost saving. So to Morten's point, bringing those down, not necessarily scaling up. And we see that that without that, I would have guys have all these folks in New York, have to have many more employees, knocking these events. And the cloud gives us the ability to knock them from anywhere in the world.
So, Brad, when we talk about virtualization, you're talking about virtualizing some of these other services, not just the connectivity, right? So,
no, absolutely.
Which ones are you exploring? Where do you see this going?
Look, we see this continuing along the lines that we're at, and continuing to scale the post-production world and the master control and distribution world. And distribution's a really big one. As satellite capacity continues to dwindle across the globe, we have to find new ways to do things, and virtualizing in that subset that's out there, and mimicking to a certain extent what the CDNs do and those big providers. They don't match the quality levels that we need as broadcasters to be then pushing out, so that they can then use a CDN to distribute to our end users. those are parts of that puzzle that are there. But quite honestly, we're seeing the ability to scale up and do more replay in the cloud. We're seeing the ability to start doing productions in the cloud, as Morten said, and some of them are offshoot productions or smaller versions of something or more defined versions of a show that's out there. And so giving ourselves that capability and ability enhances the shows we're currently doing on-prem, but gives us the same operator workflow that they're used to with the on-prem equipment. And as well, as we start to virtualize all that stuff, it becomes something that's a lot easier to manage and run on a common platform that people aren't having to learn 3 and 4 platforms to do. It's all running on a hardware stack from Dell or HP or Cisco or any of these other providers out there, so that it becomes very common. You have that, as Court was talking about, the NOCs everywhere. We now have one group of people who understand how this server works, and they're there to make sure the server works. We're there to make sure the software works with our partners. And so that becomes that ability to do something that in the end user pushing the buttons, cutting the show, producing the programming is unaware of how the background works. They didn't know how the equipment room worked before. They don't need to know now. And they don't need to know where it comes from.
Right.
And that's that capability that's there to say that, today Morten's doing programming for his news channel, but there's extra capacity. It becomes a sporting event. It becomes an entertainment show. It becomes any of those things. And that's really about where you start to really leverage this kind of commonality workflow that we're looking at, where virtualization and all these things become a reality, and being able to do so with extremely low latency video becomes that piece of the puzzle that they said that we started out with Haivision in news, and it's live shots and things over the internet. It was great. And this is back in the early 2000s. Well, now all of a sudden we've turned that into, an 8-camera production on a golf event. And we've turned it into, the amount of those cameras and things like that have existed in entertainment events in the United States is also just extremely growing. But also too, it's allowed us to do events we would have never been able to cover before. And whether it's an entertainment show, an award show, a thing like that, now all of a sudden it's all those things that are happening. It's your kid's soccer match. It's a baseball game. It's a basketball game. It's all those things, because you're able to do them at a level that was only of the highest programming and of the real capture ability of what's going on.
This is really where we're at now, where the flexibility that these workflows are providing allow everybody to do more with less effectively.
It does, but you also have to pay attention to that workflow. You can get in trouble pretty quickly. This is a whole new world out there, and everyone knows that the cloud is not up there in the cloud. It's a data center. Okay, let's call it what it is. But it's all about connectivity, right? And so, Brad, you're talking about, the bandwidth is shrinking, whether it's satellites or whether it's TV channels, it's shrinking, right? And we know that. And the reason that we're talking about 5G and we're talking about cloud is because the providers are the ones that are now granting the license to use this system, right? In the future, you'll be going to Verizon and you'll be going to AT&T and T-Mobile and Morten, whomever's out there in Europe, and you'll be requesting bandwidth from them, saying, I want a license to have this 20 meg or 30 meg or 80 meg. That's probably max you're ever going to get. You want a license from them. So you're granted access, right? And that, in my opinion, that's the future. And that's why we do need to continue to leverage it, but also to lobby with these providers. Hey, pay attention to us over here, okay?
But let me ask Morten, just to kind of close on the topic of cloud. The industry, manufacturers, the media, everybody has been talking about cloud for a long time now, a decade, certainly. It looks like there was a point when it was like driving towards all cloud, and now it looks like we've settled at a balance that, do you think we're kind of in the right place now, or will this surge towards all cloud continue at some point?
Well, I think there's still a lot of legacy in our operation that defines that we cannot just jump into a full as a cloud production. That's one thing. But also, as I tried to say before, it's probably more about in operation that it's software and where that software, where that server is, really doesn't matter. So if that's in on-premise or in the cloud, it's just someone's server somewhere. And it's the real benefit from the workflow is when it gets this virtualized, when it gets software driven, when we are using the streaming technology in the production chain. Right now, we have to get it out into hardware quite often to actually do the production, and that's where you need it on-prem anyhow. So I think it's about moving into the software world, and that seems to take a little more time than just go to the trade show and say we are cloud something.
Okay, well, but then there is a bit of enabling technology which I think allows us to pivot into the next topic of SRT. I mean, SRT has certainly, I think, played an important role in allowing these workflows to exist. Brad, I know you guys are a big user. Could you tell us a bit about how you use SRT and how perhaps you see it having changed things?
Yeah, no, SRT has been an important part of our workflow since the beginning as we launched FS1 and FS2, our two cable channels, and rebadged them and rebranded them into what they are, as from that side. And really, SRT not only enables us to move video to places and put people on the air live and do those kind of basic functions that you think about, but what it's enabled us to do is, over 30% of our programming shows have an SRT workflow directly tied to them, where an operator is working from a location not at the main production site. And whether that main production site's our core network center doing an at-home HRP REMI production, or whether or not that person is part of a production that's fully on site and they're working from a remote location, SRT enables those workflows, and Haivision for us enables those workflows to happen because we're able to move extremely low latency video across public networks in order to get it back to our network centers or our production centers, or even people's homes in some cases. Although I will be honest, we're a very limited group in sending it to people's homes for a number of reasons. But what it's given us is an ability with that capability and reliability has been to go through the process and enable these people and our top people to work on more shows because they're not traveling. We used to we're in sports. We travel people from site to site, city to city, things of that nature. Well, now all of a sudden you can take a great operator. They can do Friday night college football for us. They can do the Saturday college football game, and they can do an NFL game on a Sunday. And you look at that capability and you go, I've got this amazing person more, and he's my best replay operator, and he can do all three shows, all three of our top shows across a 3-day span. And that was something that could never have happened unless magically all three games were in the same two cities, or we're in New York for one game, in Philadelphia the next, and in Washington, D.C. in the next, where you could move those people around. But the likelihood of that happening was slim and none in most cases. So that's really enabled workflows for us and abilities for us to do things that were not seen before. And we continue to grow that workflow. We continue to expand it every single year that we've been. So we just launched this in 2020 from that side, and continue to grow that out to be able to provide that kind of resource and ability to people. Because quite honestly, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people left our industry in the United States, and I'm sure that that's true across the globe. As that happened, that they decided that it was time to retire. They were, whatever those functions were, they found other things to do. And so from that aspect, it's been able to allow us to produce at or above the levels we were producing before.
Morten, what about from your perspective? You talk a lot about 5G, but tell me a bit about how SRT plays into your workflows.
Yeah, so we have a long reputation in doing sports, especially handball, which is a big thing in Scandinavia, on remote production. So this is thousands of matches that our sports department have done. What we see with SRT now is that we can do more or less the same kind of remote production especially on the public internet, using that as a carrier for that. And that have actually mean that we have get some of our smaller OB truck out of work and taken them out of operation and replaced them with the SRT. I can also see that more and more production company we are buying as a scripted as shows and so on, are using the SRT for the editing setup. So you have centralized computing and storage and so on, but can have remote setup for monitoring and editing basically. And that's really that changed a lot in the workflow. So SRT is getting there getting in our operation, definitely redefine what we can do.
So Court, you were talking about the way you guys are moving video from all your NOCs and all these. I assume you're also moving things between solutions from different vendors. Could you comment a little bit about SRT in terms of something that allows multi-vendor workflows to happen?
Well, I'll just state this very bluntly. Without SRT, my business is not what it is right now. The SRT and REMI should be tied together. I don't know how you would do a REMI without SRT. Okay, we've done RTMP, we've done RTSP, but we've done WebRTC. Okay, and the quality of those do not match SRT, and the latency, as Brad continues to mention. Okay, when you are looking at less than 60 milliseconds of latency, that's pretty incredible. Right. And so that's a function of SRT. Now, again, you need that pipe. If you don't have a good pipe, okay, you're in trouble. Right. But SRT allows you to get around a pipe that you might be pushing the limits on bandwidth wise. Right. Every single REMI we do is we do transmission to our customers, and everything is done with SRT. So it's widely acceptable. Nobody's asking, well, I want to bring a KU truck down to your production center. I haven't seen a KU band in a satellite truck in 4 years, right? It's all Haivision, it's all SRT. I think that the events that we do, we never know what the bandwidth is going to be on location. Right. That's another thing. I mean, it's great when you're going into basketball and you have an arena and you've got a dedicated circuit. But when you're going to a rowing event in Gainesville, you hope you've got, 100 over 100. And you know that you can get at 8 megabits, 5 cameras out of there. Right. So that's what SRT has changed, that I can take. And again, it starts with a good camera, a good lens, okay? And so it's good data in and good data out, and that's what SRT does for us.
So Brad, could you tell us a little bit about your experience with multi-vendor interop enabled through SRT?
Yeah, no. So we obviously own a very large, substantial Haivision system network, but we also own a number of products from a number of other manufacturers that allow us with SRT to drive into the cloud, for example. We've done a lot of workflows with that, and I think as well the other point process there is that it works between products, it works between vendors, it works between machines and computers and tablets and devices and all those things, and that's a really good piece of the puzzle, is that as long as you have 3 or 4 pieces of pertinent data, you can log into a stream and watch something. As long as you know if you're a caller or a listener, as long as you know what the IP is and the port number is and whether it's got encryption, for the most part, you can make it happen on all kinds of devices and things. And the fact that there's an ecosystem kind of outside of it that's saying it's not this piece of hardware, it's, hey, we've taken this piece of hardware and figured out how to do these other things on it. And make that happen is really important to how we all continue to develop the workflows that are there. But I think the one thing that I want to make sure everyone out there understands is that SRT is the transmission workflow behind what we're doing. It's not the encoding, it's not the decoding, it's the workflow that gets you from point A to point B or point A to point A, B, C, D, E, F, and G at the same time. And that setup and workflow is really important because we've done and do SRT with JPEG XS. We do it with HEVC. We do it with MPEG-4. Like, we're just taking that and making that the mechanism that gets us from point A to point B with real-time data that's behind it to understand what the network's doing as this signal is traversing the networks that are either private, quite honestly, or public that are out there. And so that's the important part of this, is that you're getting real-time data back and forth if you have the right SRT hardware and the right SRT data streams that are there, that you can look at and understand what's happening with your signal. As Court said, you get to a place and you get 100 over 100. Well, 100 over 100 is great until you flood it, and you got to figure out how you're flooding it. SRT data that exists and is transporting with that video packet that's moving gives you that ability to look at it and understand what you have to do, and that, you know what, really, all of a sudden now, it's not 100 over 100. It's 93 over 80. Okay, now if I bring some things down and I make some adjustments, I can do that, whether it's in latency or whatever, or actual, encoded bandwidth. So there's a lot of additional features that, until you dig in, you'll find out that your engineers are going to love, and it's going to make your show and your product better.
Okay. If we didn't get to the topic of AI, people would be very disappointed, because judging from the press coverage, that seems to be the area that people are really interested in hearing what everybody thinks. So if you wouldn't mind, let's shift over to that. And let me just start with the key takeaway that we had from the survey. 25% of broadcasters are using AI, up from 9% last year. And 64% believe it will have the biggest impact on the industry in the next 5 years. So Morten, let's start with you. What do you think?
I'm not using AI for live production, at least. So we use AI in some part of our production. In production, actually, it's limited. It's still something around transcription and audio or something, and so I'm still looking for where the real where it will be a new efficient tool helping me supporting my live operation, and that's we're not seeing very much in that area so far. I hope it will be part of that. Will support the way that we have to navigate and monitor and understand the network, as an example, like Brad told about before all the adjustment that you can do, that could potentially be something that should be AI assisted. And we have, there's cases for this definitely, but I think it's not that. It's, for now, it's more in post-production, graphic and other stuff, but hopefully coming to live.
And certainly some of the findings suggested that people were using, for instance, for content creation or efficiency gains came up a number of times. But going from 9% to 25%, that's a pretty big jump. Brad, do you guys see AI coming into your workflows?
We do, and I think that the understanding is that more and more people are producing products that have AI capable ideas and sets. And as Morten pointed out, look, having all the data from an SRT workflow that exists is phenomenal. The problem is that you have to sort through it. You have to go into each device to figure out what's going on, and you can build centralized command things. That is AI. The centralized command interface that then starts to think for you or help you get to what you want. They know that, I need to set up alert flags if my feed is under 8 megabits a second. Like, that's below the standard I have. It's producing bad video. It's giving me those alerts and those things to understand, how do I fix that problem? How do I send the limited number of people I have into delving into the problem? And that's where this number is going to continue to rise very quickly over the next couple of years. And I think that 5 years is a very realistic example of what's going to happen, because it's these little things. It's not the thing that says it's going to produce all my content. That's not going to happen. It's going to help me manage cameras better, run cameras better. It's going to help me do things. It's going to help me allow a photographer to shoot wider, so when it goes in the edit bay, it's already thinking about what the real framing should have been, because it's a 4K image. I'm putting out 1080p. I'm cropping and scanning and doing those things. It's about making people better than what they are and letting them focus on the creativity and abilities that they have in order to produce better content for the viewers.
Okay, I want to come back to the point about making people better, but first of all, Court, what do you see? Where are you seeing AI?
Well, so it's interesting. I went to a conference the other day talking about AI, and all they talked about with AI was it makes me a better writer. Okay. ChatGPT. Makes me a better writer. I want to articulate this point. I can't do it. Let me put it into AI. Oh, wow, that's really cool. To Brad's point, if you can take that, translate that into, I can manage data in a workflow better, then I see AI being something that could be beneficial. We use AI in capture. Okay, so we use AI in PTZ cameras that are following a hockey puck, following it. And so the AI becomes an automated camera operator. And I know cam ops don't want to hear this, but on low level, one camera shoots covering a hockey game, AI is there now, right? And I'm not talking about AI that takes a 4K field of view and then follows within it. I'm talking about AI that's actually operating a PTZ. And we have a company that we're working with out of the Netherlands that is now actually the AI is controlling the pan, tilt, and zoom of the camera. The server is on-prem right now. Eventually, it will be in the cloud. But to me, for these, again, enhanced coverage, like Brad said, let's say you're at a basketball game and you have all of these, he's doing his main show, right? And then I have a direct-to-consumer digital show that I want to do, okay? But I don't have an extra camera operator, can't afford it. Let me throw an AI PTZ at center court and let it follow the game and tell it what to ISO onto, okay? I want you to follow this player all the time, okay? And that's out there right now. There's two companies that we're working with. One is doing that, one is following the sport itself. That's where we use AI. And I think that's going to continue to grow because AI is a learning machine. But it's only learning what you tell it to learn. You have to give it its baseline. AI is essentially dumb until you say, hey, these are the parameters, right? So we are teaching AI. So I see it continuing to advance in that area. We don't use AI in the cloud or any type of production, as Morten was saying. We do, however, use AI on post-production. When we want to do a quick sizzle reel or we want to take an event and we want to say, hey, instead of sending it to an editor, we throw it into an AI program and we tell it what we want it to do. And we tell it what format. Do I want it for Instagram? Do I want it for YouTube? Do I want it for Facebook? Right? What's the format? What is it, vertical? Okay. Or is it horizontal? Right? Vertical sports is huge now. Everybody's doing vertical. Okay, cool. AI creates those sizzle reels and those programs are out there too. So that's where we use it. I don't see it becoming a huge takeover of a technical director or a replay operator for live sports anytime soon.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. I know we could talk a lot more about AI, but what I'd really like to ask you guys, if you could just very quickly, each one of you, give me what you think might be a bold prediction for where the broadcast industry is going in the future. If you don't mind, Brad, I'll start with you, put you on the spot.
Sure. No, I think that the revolution of change that we've seen in the last 5 years because of the pandemic, pushing workflows in a certain way, enabling the cloud and doing those things is going to accelerate at a rate that nobody's expecting. And I think that it's these little minute changes we're seeing in AI. It's the little minute changes we're seeing in virtualization. It's that process that's there that all of a sudden the capital that you're spending today is going to be spent wildly differently in 5 years from that aspect. And that the advance rate of how this stuff is progressing is, again, going to help you do things better and differently, but it's going to be a completely different world that we're in. And that process used to be a very slow thing in broadcasting. Change is a very quick thing now. And, you turn around and 6 months later, you're doing something you haven't done in years and it's reliable and it works and it does that. And I think that that's what we're going to see is a change in how capital's deployed. What
about you, Morten?
I think right now it's a lot about the new connectivity we are getting. I think because I'm able to get connected anywhere in the world, it's so much easier than it used to be to have a reliable connection. I can produce content, places where it will be normally difficult. And I think that's really a step we have seen right now. We have a lot to do around Greenland at the moment. We have just done remote production, with Greenland, and in the past, it was impossible to even think about having multi-camera production, places like that. Now it's just, hey, it's not that tricky. So I think as a connectivity is so much more reliable, and we see that there will be growing. I agree, the AI or the assisted automated production, we will see a lot more of that, and looking forward to that. It makes it so easy to have low-scale production running.
Okay, and Gort?
I predict that you will see many, many more events turn to, as Morten said, the connectivity, bonded cellular, Haivision as a hybrid, or SRT as a transport stream from site. Remy's have been the fastest growing thing. Home run productions that Brad is doing is the fastest growing area. I predict that eventually you will see more of that than on-prem.
Well, I think that sounds very much like what people are saying in the report, because when they were asked what their top priority was, the top answer continues to be implementing remote production workflows. So even though a lot of it's already happening, there's still plenty more to go. And I think these topics, 5G connectivity, SRT, cloud, all of these are AI critical to making this possible. So with that, we're at the end. We're only 1 minute over, which is remarkable. I'd like to thank you guys very, very much for joining us today and providing us with your very keen insights. There are a small number of questions. We will get back to everybody afterwards, but I'd like to let everybody stick with their schedule as we promised. And with that, thank you all very much for attending. Thank you, our panelists, for being here with us today. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.